Hey guys, I want to take a moment to talk about depression and when you're struggling with it. This is going to be something that's going to be relatively common for all of us going through this just because of the nature of the experience, the emotional abuse, and just trying to make sense of it. Now, when you're in the beginning stage of this, going through this, it makes sense. You're dealing with depression because you're actually still struggling with all the stuff that's going on, trying to make sense of it, and just in that state of denial, and it's just overwhelming. Now, the hard part about this is that as you progress on and you start doing better, you're going to have these ups and downs where you're feeling good and where you're feeling bad. Now, as it progresses on, when you start to feel better more often, then when the depression rolls, kind of sneaks its way in or, slowly creeps in, when it hits, it can feel really devastating because you feel like all the progress that you've made, that you've lost, and that the way you're feeling right now is the way you're going to feel forever. And one of the things that you need to remember is you don't feel a certain way 100% of the time. You're not going to feel wonderful 100% of the time, and you're not going to feel depression 100% of the time, or angry, or whatever the emotion is. Everything is going to roll through in phases. Now, it's a little more complicated with depression because it's kind of an insidious little beast that sneaks its way in. And when it happens, you're fighting with your own mind and your own inner voice and your own inner critic that is basically telling you that you don't deserve to be happy, that you're a failure. I mean, whatever those negative voices are that are like whispering in your ear. I'm not saying that you actually hear, the little words, but what I'm saying is that that sense of dread can really creep in. And the really tough part about this is it can actually feel like it comes out of nowhere, that everything is running fine and then boom, it jumps in. Now, I know that we've talked about this recently in the context of how when things calm down and when you're starting to feel better, when you're starting to feel relaxed, some of those feelings and emotions that you've been repressing can sneak back in. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually repressing them. It could just be that you're in this hyper state of vigilance, so to speak, and you're focusing on getting everything done, and you're focusing on keeping on track, that when you have a break, everything seems to come crashing down. Now, this is something that it seems like I deal with on a regular basis. It seems like as soon as I get to a point where, I'm kind of in a holding pattern and nothing else is coming at me, or maybe a few things have just kind of like just like chipped off the side or something, that I'll just kind of crash. And it's one of those things where now I recognize what it is, so I can look at it and say, okay, well, this is not going to be permanent. This isn't, let me back up. In the past, when this would happen, I would start thinking about it and it would be like that feedback loop. It would just get louder and louder and faster until it overshadowed everything else that was going on. Now that I'm a little bit more aware of what's happening, when it happens, I recognize what it is. I'm like, okay. And typically, like I've mentioned in the past, it's because something external is happening. Either I'm really run down, I'm really tired, I'm under a lot of stress, work, depends on what it is. It could be work, family, kids, the divorce situation. For the most part, everything's pretty calm, but there's always little things that are going on. I mean, just recently with the furloughs and stuff, that was something that really got to me in a way that I didn't necessarily anticipate once it was finally over. The key on that is just to recognize it and give yourself the time to just, deal with it. Not wallow in it, but just try to just relax, try to just switch what you're doing, give yourself something else to focus on, to let it go through, let it just kind of hit you, wash over, and then pass through you so that you can move on. And that's kind of the phase I'm in right now. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is I remember when I was going through this before and these moments would happen, it would send me into a tailspin. I would get so just devastatedly freaked out about everything that was going on and the what ifs and what might happen and what is happening, and then blow it out of proportion, catastrophize my thinking on what was going to happen, and it would just make everything out of control. And that does, I mean, I can look past my entire life and all the different times that that's happened, and Honestly, I can't think of any time where the vision in my head of what I thought was going to be as catastrophic really happened. It generally doesn't happen. The problem is that fear in your mind saying, but this might be the time, is what gets to you. And that's what you have to kind of, you kind of have to balance that. You have to balance it with reality, with is it really worth worrying about? Now, I know you've probably heard a lot of people talk about that. It's like, well, why worry about things you can't control? And it's really easy. It's easy to say, right? But there is a lot of truth to that. If you can look at it and go, okay, well, it's not really, none of these things are really happening now, so I don't necessarily have to let my mind delve into the depths of despair to really, live or feel or think through all those moments. Bottom line is you just got to give yourself time to recover. If you're dealing with this and you're feeling down, don't let yourself think that this is going to be your life for the rest of, this is going to be the way you feel for eternity. It feels like it at the time. I can tell you, I can relate to that. But, once you've gone through it enough, you'll realize that it's cyclical. You have your good days, you have your bad days. Everyone does. Even people who aren't going through what we've gone through are going to have good days and bad days. It's a little bit easier to fake it when you're having bad days, when everything else is basically okay and you're just under a little bit of stress because it's not so, your nerves aren't rubbed so raw. But in our situation, that's going to be a little bit more of the reality of it. But just if you can look at it and recognize it, then maybe you can give yourself a little bit of peace and say, okay, well, let me go do something. Let me watch a funny movie. Let me take a nap. Let me go outside, and look at the sunset or whatever it is to help break you free from it. You're going to know, you already know intuitively what is the normal thing that you can do to help break yourself from it. Start trying to do those. Don't expect it to happen overnight. Don't think that you're going to do one thing and it's just going to make everything, click back on track. Sometimes it does. The only reason I say that is because I don't want you to think about it or think you're going to do one thing and then whenever it's over, if it's not, if it hasn't worked its magic for you, to think that, oh my God, I'm trapped. You're not trapped. You're going to get through it. It's just one of those things that we have to go through. It's one of those things I deal with on a regular, semi-regular basis myself. Everyone does. And it's, not as devastating as it probably feels. So give yourself a break and just allow yourself some time to process it. I can't tell you how many times I've talked with people where I've even seen it, where, they'll be doing really well. Something will happen, they'll crash, then they'll come back up and feel a little bit better. And it's like whenever they crash again, they always lose sight of when they were feeling better. So that's why sometimes if you journal or you can do something to remind yourself of those times, that can be really helpful. So on that, I'm going to wrap this video up. Hopefully you're doing okay. Hopefully you're not dealing too much with what I was just talking about. I know I am, but and I'll talk with you guys in the next video. Take care. Bye.